Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility, along with Steven Reid. Welcome to another edition of What's Hot with Sea of Tranquility. Today, we're going to take a look at a brand new release from a pretty dependable band over the last few years, Britain's very own Cats in Space, Atlantis.
Yes, there we go.
There we have it.
Beautiful looking album, even better sounding album.
There you go. So as Stephen and I were just talking before we went on the air here, he's been following them kind of pretty much from the beginning, and he actually turned me on to them 2 albums ago, where he was ranting and raving about one of those exactly. And I was like, I never heard these guys before. And he goes, I know everything that you like. You need to listen to these guys. So I was like, all right. So I went out and I ordered the then new album at the time. I was like, holy crap. Where has this band been all my life? And correct me if I'm wrong, but these guys always seem to put out a new album right at the end of the year, right when I've already got my final list together. And they're like, oh, Cats in Space has a new one. I'm like, I got to reconfigure the whole best of the year again. And they did it again this year.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of that this year, to be fair, but
yes, there has.
Yes,
but these guys have done this to me more than once. So before we dive into talk about the music in the album here, so I want to thank Andrew Kitson, who is their artist, who does all the incredible artwork on all their albums. He and I have been communicating quite a bit lately, and he sent me a copy of the new digipack here called Atlantis, and I do want to show off some of this wonderful artwork. There you got photos of the band on either side, but check that out right there. Okay, but that's not all. So then you got the booklet, which is adorned with some pretty cool stuff. So again, a lot of concept stuff going throughout this album here, and Mr. Kitson has actually done a fine job of really adorning this release with the artistic majesty that it deserves. So you got all the lyrics, you got some pictures of the band, you got some additional artwork. I mean, check that out. But more importantly, look at that. That's pretty beautiful right there.
Yeah, it's a thing of beauty.
Yeah. So, if you're someone who's, I'll just pick up the download, well, you're missing a lot of additional stuff if you do.
Well, I've been lucky enough to get a promo, but I'm very jealous of your full copy, and I will be buying a full copy because that is a thing of beauty, as all the releases are, to be fair. The artwork, they're old school. If you go onto Cats in Space website, they release singles, they have merch, they have concepts, they have a logo, they have the fancy Cat in Space ship logo face thing that's on most of what they do. For a guy like me that came up with bands doing that sort of thing, it ticks all the right boxes. All they need to do is sound magnificent, and they sound magnificent too. So you can't go wrong with them if you like that sort of thing, where there's a clear, they care about what they're doing, they care about what people are spending their money on, and it comes across in the product that you get. I have to say, I like that a lot.
Well, I mean, that's an old school mentality, and I think that's the reason why you and I and a lot of other people really dig this band, because they're kind of like a throwback. Musically, as well as what they put into the packaging of their products. So, but a couple little changes here in the band this time around, or specifically one, right? So I'll let you talk a little bit about kind of what's been going on in the band, then we'll dive into the album.
Well, quite a big change in actual fact, because previously they've had Paul Manzi as their vocalist, and I think most of us will know Paul from Arena, where he's also just parted ways with them. Around about the same sort of time that he then announced he was parting ways with Cats in Space, he's thrown his lot in with The Sweet, which is no bad thing to be, great band. He'll be fantastic with them. It makes me intrigued actually to see that lineup with him singing, because I think he'll do that sort of material real justice. It did make me worry a little bit, because I think that the vocals are key to what Cats in Space do, partly through Paul, partly though because, and having seen them live on the previous tour that they did for Day Trip to Narnia, which is the third full album, the whole band sing, and they kind of swap little bits of lead vocals, but there's lots of gang vocals, and they do it all live. It's not all taped, and it was absolutely magnificent. And the chemistry that was there, I was really a little concerned that you change that and you would lose it a little bit. So they brought in Mark Pascal. His only real release was a Christmas album, or Christmas-ish album. There's a little bit of re-records and various things on here. This one is My Kind of Christmas, which has the song My Kind of Christmas. Yeah, This Is London. A few things that were written and recorded just for this. It was a way to introduce the new vocalist, but Mark didn't stick with the band for very long, and they brought in Damien Edwards, who was well known to Greg Hart, who is the guitarist in the band and was one of the main songwriters and is now kind of the main songwriter. Damien does a fantastic job on this album, but the other change there is in the songwriting, because Mick Wilson, part of 10cc, has co-written an awful lot of the previous albums, and he's done backing vocals and various things and been involved along the way. He took a step back for this album. It was a kind of a conscious decision between the two to do a rockier, heavier album. Mick still does backing vocals. They're still, good friends. He's still part of what's going on, but that has resulted in a little bit of a different flavour here too. And initially, I kind of thought, no, I'm not so sure. I like the quirky 70 isms of what was there before, the sort of Supertramp element, but you didn't quite know what was going to happen. Is it going to be a crazy prog song? Are we going to get a bit of fusion? Will we get some sax thrown in? What's going to come? But that is still there, but the guitars have been ranked up just a little bit more, and it's turned out to be no bad thing, I have to say.
Yeah, the album definitely does rock a bit more than their previous releases. Like you said, that's not a bad thing at all, but everything else is still there.
Yeah.
I mean, the multi-layered, gorgeous vocal harmonies are there. The hooks, might even be more hooks on this album. Is that possible? I don't know. Plenty of keyboards, plenty of guitars, some really magical anthemic songs. I hate, we always tend to do this, as journalists, obviously, because you're trying to convince people to go out and investigate bands and music, right? So you have to kind of throw little hooks at them to say, okay, well, if you like this, you'll like this. I mean, I listen to this album and I hear Styx, I hear Queen, I hear 10cc, I hear Boston. I hear Boston's first two albums. And it's just like, you're maybe a little Journey here and there, a little Aviary, all the usual suspects, but it's still Cats in Space. And it just works. I mean, there's some killer songs on here that just kind of take me back to an era, where that's really all you were looking for. Tunes that rocked and you could sing along to, and they just couldn't get them out of your head. I mean, as I was telling Steven before we went on the air, I was just playing this before we started recording, and I'm still hearing the melodies to Atlantis, the title track. I'm still ready to go out and headbang to Listen to the Radio. I mean, Listen to the Radio is, if we go back to 1982, that is top 10 song.
Oh yeah,
on the radio. That is an MTV staple. I don't care. That could be a fact. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, Transport Us Back in Time, Listen to the Radio is a smash hit. How can
what I like about songs like Listen to the Radio is there's a story there. These lyrics are, it's all about the journey, no pun intended, of listening to the radio to pick up the music that you wanted to listen to that we can't do anymore,
Yeah.
And it's things like I fell out of love with rock and roll,
Yeah.
which is a true story. That was one of those things that when we were putting the album together, Greg had kind of admitted that kind of 90s-ish, he fell out of love with rock and roll, and he was looking to try and do something else, and Cats in Space was his way back into this world. And it's all about how that's, reinvigorated him and just captured everything that he loves about, the music that he's now creating. And as you say, those influences are clearly there. It's pomp rock. The biggest thing for me with Cats in Space is their fun. Do we've been through periods where the rock has been very earnest and kind of introspective. And there's no apologies here for the fact that Cats in Space, they appear to have fun writing this, recording this. Having seen them live, they have great fun playing it live. But it comes across in the songs that they're upbeat, they're catchy, but they're not throwaway. And that's the amazing thing about this, is they've captured that vibe of the late 70s, early 80s, where music that was this catchy still somehow had so much substance. That, as you said, there's hooks everywhere, but there's great musicianship in this band, and the interplay between Dean Howard and Greg Hart on guitars, but with Andy Stewart on keyboards, it all just comes together. There's no competition. It's just, these instruments talking to each other. There's a destination to take the song to. The solos are outstanding, but the whole construction of the songs and the arrangements are just phenomenal. And I just love the way that none of the songs feel throwaway. Nothing just feels like, oh, well, that'll do. There's real craft and care in every single one. I go as far as to say that they're probably my favourite new band of maybe even the last 10 years, realistically, because they haven't put a foot wrong. Some albums are better than others, but that's just because the best ones are fantastic. This is ranking up there with them, I may add. But even the ones that maybe don't quite hit as hard, only don't hit as hard because the standard is just so high. Take those, I think the first album and the newest album are maybe the pinnacle, and the middle two, Scarecrow and Narnia, are just fantastic albums, but they're just not quite as good as the first and the last. But really, I mean, I'm glad we're not ranking these albums, because it would be really, really hard. Because
oh yeah, tell me about it. Well, that's going to be the next thing. People can be like, all right, so well, now that you did the show, rank the albums. Like, oh man.
Well, put it this way, I mean, there are 4 albums in, and I could already probably give you a 20-track best of. That's how good these albums are, because there's nothing throwaway here. I'm really, really, really impressed.
Yeah, I mean, just top to bottom, this is just, and you really hit on something before that is so indicative of this band. It's fun to listen to. This is fun music. This takes you back to a time where you listen to music for that pure enjoyment factor, and that's not always the case nowadays. And there's some albums, well, I shouldn't say some, there's a lot of albums that come out that demand that you really sit and meticulously listen to all these little things that are going on. And then there's something like this that's like, you know what? Pop it in your CD player or however you listen to your music, and just enjoy the gift of music as a bunch of pros have put together for you, and enjoy it and sing along. And I will say, and I don't say this all the time, but I always try to point it out when an example comes up. This is one of those rare releases, you maybe get a couple a year, where one listen in, only one, and you already remember half the songs or more.
Yeah.
Right? That does not happen often.
And they stay with you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of albums that, you put on first couple of times, you think, oh, wow, this is brilliant. And then 4 or 5 listens down the line, you're like, yeah, I maybe got carried away. You don't get carried away with Cats in Space. You don't get carried away with this album, because it hits home. Like yourself, I put it on again today before we came on to have a chat about this. And I'm still loving it as much as I did, more so than I did.
Yeah, I was going to say more so probably, right?
Because I'm still capturing, little bits that I didn't quite pick out early on. There's little nuances. There's great little interplays between, the instruments that you think, oh, wow, oh, I'm just hearing that now. But the sound is fantastic too, it has to be said. That it's clear as a bell without being over compressed, as a lot of albums can be this year. Even some of my favourite albums this year, the production, I think, if you look at towards the sort of sound I may be looking for from the 70s, doesn't match up in the same way. It still hits hard, it still sounds great, but it sounds more sterile. What I find with Cats in Space is they've managed to capture that old sound, make it new, but without compromising somewhere in the middle. But I love the way that the album starts. I mean, you've got Dive as your opening number. And I mean, it's a submarine going down. There's klaxons going, and you can feel the submarine going down. And especially given the timing, I suppose, it's a fantastic tribute for me to Eddie Van Halen. That guitar sound, that dun, 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 that comes in, it's just Eddie Van Halen. And I presume that it's a knowing nod to that, because they're not shy about their influences. And I like that too. Lots of bands will say, oh yeah, I know we'd never listened to music like that when we were young. Cats in Space did, and they're happy to tell you that they did. And they're playing this because they love that music. But they're making music that's actually, and I don't say this lightly, it's as good as that music. We're throwing massive names out there: Queen, Styx, Boston. I'll throw ELO in there as well, because some of the, not so much, there's not lots of strings and things like that, but I think some of the rhythms, that kind of, train sort of chug that ELO used to kind of have.
Multi-layered vocal harmonies too. I'd even throw Toto in there a little bit as well. Yeah,
Absolutely. And they do seem to be able to bring elements of AOR, elements of pomp, for want of a better turn of phrase, elements of prog, and they bring it all together into songs that are just, is it pop? Is it rock? Is it prog? Yes, it just is. It's all of those things,
Totally.
you know, and every one of them are all of those things.
Yeah.
And factor in, as you say, phenomenal vocals. And I mean, I really, if I had a hat, I'd be taking it off right now, because for a new guy to come in, as Damien Edwards has, and just to fit in so easily into a band that I felt, you know, the lead singer here is so important. He's doing so much that this is going to be really difficult to make a change. And he's just stepped up to the plate as if he's always been in this band. And right from, you know, the first lines that he sings on Spaceship Superstar, I genuinely thought, well, Brad Delp. I mean, we're there. We're talking a singer that's that good. And it's, I mean, we're waxing lyrical here, but there's lots to wax lyrical about it. Please, people, it's that good. Believe us, it's that good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say if you never listened to these guys before, go listen to this whole album. If you're someone who has to go listen to a song or two or whatever, I mean, I don't know, Stephen, you may have a couple others, but I'm going to say Spaceship Superstar, listen to the radio, Atlantis, and maybe Queen of the Neverland or Marionettes. The whole thing is good, though. It's hard to pick a couple, but I would easily start there. But Atlantis is cool because it's kind of proggy, and then all of a sudden those big soaring harmonies come in. The whole like second half of the song is just an absolute joy. It's just so good. It's so good.
And a lost start, but for, you know, people of a certain vintage, shall we say, the pacing of the album is so key here as well. That's something we've spoken about before.
Yep.
I know that we live in a modern era. I know that most people are working off playlists and things like that, and these songs will stand alone on a playlist. A lot of albums I'll say, do you know what, try and listen to it all in one go because it makes much more sense. This album makes even more sense played from start to finish because they care about how this has been constructed. There's a journey that the album does, you know, go in layers and it flows, but you can pick out these songs individually and still think, oh, wow, that's a great song. They're ticking those boxes, and that's going back to bands like ELO, who had proper full albums that mattered from start to finish, but could have top 10 hits. Do you know? And that's the travesty, is that this music won't do that now, because these guys deserve that sort of recognition. And as I say, having seen them live, I mean, they're throwing it out live as well as if it's easy, and what they're doing is not easy. Do you know? Great stuff.
Yeah. So hopefully everybody's sold. Go out and you know, check them out. Go visit on their website. Let me see if I have any of that information for you here. Well, just go search Cats in Space Atlantis. Go buy it. Go order it. Go listen to it. Whatever you got to do. We highly recommend it. And thanks again to the band for once again forcing me to redo my entire best of the year list at the last minute. I was just set to submit it, and now I got to reconfigure it here. But that's okay. It's better I get it in than I don't, right? So
always good to make changes for good music, though, isn't it?
Yes, that is true.
For the right reasons.
That is true. So, and read Steven's full review. It's a nice, big, long, lengthy one that goes into the entire album in depth at www.seaoftranquility.org. Make sure you check that out. And in case you don't believe us here, go read his review, then go out and check out the music. And I want to thank Steven for jumping on for a quick one here today to talk about this very, very fine album. We'll be seeing Steven coming up in the very near future. So in the meantime, visit our website, check us out on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, and don't forget, we're here on YouTube.
All the damn time.
There you go. Absolutely all the damn time. So coming up, we got a Monsters Den episode coming for you later on. We've got the Hudson Valley Squares coming up tomorrow. Martin Popoff is back on the show tomorrow. We're going to rank the albums of Faith No More. We are doing tomorrow. Tomorrow's a busy day, guys. We've got another favorite guitar solo day. Frank Marino, the legendary Canadian guitar player Frank Marino, featuring myself and two Sea of Tranquility alumni, Mike Blackburn and Ryan Sparks, are going to help me out with that episode. Both know Frank pretty well personally, so I knew they were the right guys to tackle that one with. So that's all coming up, and Stephen and I, and hopefully a couple other Sea of Tranquility folks, will be doing a kind of best of the year wrap up over the next 2 weeks. So before somewhere between Christmas and New Year's. So stay tuned for that as well, and a hell of a lot more. So for Steven Reid, I am Pete Pardo. Take care, everybody.